Last week's Let's Talk Night led to a lot of great discussions about the power of forgiveness. We learned that holding on to guilt will give us a dysfunctional and twisted view of love. But when we embrace the power of forgiveness, we can see love the way God defines it, and be freed up to love others that way too. Throughout this episode, there will be breaks with questions where you can pause the video and discuss together, and then continue watching. Enjoy part 2 of our discussion on the power of forgiveness.
The house that built me. And I said we're going to talk about, well, what we're going to talk about first is the door, the garage, and the roof, starting relationships. Now that slide is there for your entertainment. We're going to break it down. Are you ready? Are you ready? Take a deep breath, make a sip of water, and you know what you might need? Take a little bite of that Cinnabon. Keep you sweet. That's right. Keep you sweet as we're going through it. Let's take a look. So the first thing we want to do is, what is your view of love? When you look at the door, what's your view of love? Is it dysfunctional or adaptive? That's the question. The bottom line is that when we are dysfunctional, we've taken a wrong approach to dealing with pain, difficulty, and suffering. Now, I'm simplifying this. I'm not trying to be a psychologist, and that is a psychological word that's often used, but it's a word in the English language that's used. There are a lot of things in my life where I've become dysfunctional and had to learn to be adaptive. Adaptive means your response to pain, difficulty, and suffering is to have your life be changed or transformed. When you're dysfunctional, you really kind of twist yourselves into a pretzel, not that pretzels aren't good, instead of being a human being. And we end up doing a lot of things that are not good. And for many of us, even during this time, we don't understand that part of the reason we're having difficulty is under stress, which we're all under stress, we go to dysfunction instead of becoming adaptive. And so what's your view of love? How do you think about love? What's your definition of love? And how does your view of love affect how you interact with people? That's what I looked at with my life. Throughout my life, I went through and thought about my whole life, all of the issues, all the sins, all the problems, all the issues, all the wrong, all the mistakes can almost 100% be driven back to or directed back to, connected to dysfunctional perspectives I took. Wrong ways of looking at people, wrong ways of thinking about life, wrong ways of responding. And what I've noticed in my conversations is that most of us blame people on the outside and we say, hey, what's your problem? Why'd you do that to me? And we don't realize that part of it's dysfunction. And we're seeing a lot more dysfunction right now, even publicly in society, because a lot of people are going to the twisted definitions of love that they may have developed because of pain, suffering, and difficulty, instead of having worked it out. You have to work that stuff out. Let's take a look at Galatians 5:13, see what it says. Brothers and sisters, God has called you to freedom. Hear the call and do not spoil this gift by using your liberty to engage in what your flesh desires. Instead, use it to serve each other as Jesus taught through love. So what happens when you use your flesh, when you react in your flesh, when you do what's instinctive? You end up doing what we've seen people do at the grocery store, yelling at people in their face because someone said wear a mask, and yelling at them and spitting at them and infecting them, coughing as though they've got COVID-19. What's that all about? That's about dysfunction. That's about someone who hasn't learned that other people have a right to live their life even if you don't agree with them. It's dysfunctional to punish people. There's a lot of dysfunction. Adaptive people in society can look out there and say, I might not agree with you, I might not see it your way, but I can still love you. How do we get there? We have to work our way through our dysfunction. And that's how Jesus tells us to do it. Instead of indulging ourselves, instead of being bitter and angry, and we're going to talk about that, instead use it to serve each other as Jesus taught through love. This is something else. And some of us may be tempted to turn off the TV now, because for me, it is jolting to look at my level of dysfunction. Let's take a little look here and simplify this. Dysfunction is the choice to be twisted by pain, difficulty, and suffering rather than transformed. We are all going to face pain. We are all going to face difficulty, and we're all going to face suffering. And whether or not we come out of it twisted, cynical, pessimistic, suspicious, or angry, or instead come at it with understanding, a sense of vision, a sense of purpose of why our life can make a difference, is all determined by whether or not we decide, I'm just going to let life twist me, or I'm going to be adaptive. This is incredibly important. And we all have our stories. We all have our pain. We all have our difficulty. We all have our suffering. We can all sit back and say, something has happened to me that no one else has had happen to them, and you can't understand my pain because you didn't go through what I went through. 100% right. 100% true. But the question isn't whether or not you can understand my pain or I can understand your pain. The question is, how do we respond to our pain? That's the question. Because whether or not we handle our pain, difficulty, or suffering the right way or the wrong way, it's not going to affect somebody living across the street from you or living 1,000 miles from you. It's not going to affect someone living 1,000 miles from me or living across the street from me. It's going to affect me. Whether or not I handle my pain, difficulty, and suffering correctly is going to determine whether I build a house of fear or I build a house of faith. It's going to determine whether I build a house of fear or I build a house of love. And so when we talk about our view of love, is our view of love, I'm going to live myself and be dysfunctional and just pay everybody back for every wrong thing ever done to me? Or am I going to live my life adaptive and say, I'm not going to let the evil that was done to me turn me into evil? This is incredibly important from a biblical point of view because Jesus had evil done to him. And what was his response? He came out loving. He didn't come out unloving. He came out totally molded by faith instead of twisted by fear. Incredible. Jesus matters.
Pause the video and discuss together, and then continue watching.
So let's take a look at the next question. How do you handle emotional clutter? How about it? When you get the garage, you know how we get a lot of junk in our garage, it gets all piled up because we don't deal with it. You know how we become pack rats? I'm a pack rat, packing stuff in, don't want to throw anything away. I might need that. Still got stuff from 1963. I need it. I'll hold on to like a pen, like, this thing is all done. No, but I have memories associated with that paper I wrote. I gotta keep it. I'm totally guilty of this. But what about emotional clutter? How do you handle emotional clutter? How do I handle emotional clutter? Do you become bitter about all the stuff you stored up? Do we become bitter about all the stuff we've stored in our garage? Or do we become forgiving? In Ephesians 4 and verse 26, be angry at sin, at immorality, at injustice, at ungodly behavior. Yeah, be angry, yet do not sin. He's not saying that anger in and of itself is a sin, but he's saying when sin is, and I like the Amplified here, when sin is done against you, immorality, injustice, ungodly behavior, you can be angry, but don't you become sinful in response. Don't let what was done to you make you dysfunctional. Yeah, sin is dysfunction. Be angry at sin, at immorality, at injustice, and ungodly behavior, yet do not sin. Do not let your anger cause you shame, nor allow it to. Last. Don't allow it to last. Don't allow it to go on day after day, night after night, until the sun goes down. Don't just keep. Well, let's read it, verse 27. And do not give the devil an opportunity. What is the devil trying to do with the wrong that is done to us, with the emotional clutter we have in our lives? What's he trying to do? And do not give the devil an opportunity to lead you into sin by holding a grudge. That's in the garage. Or nurturing anger in the garage. Or harboring resentment in the garage. Or cultivating bitterness. How do we cultivate bitterness? By holding on to grudges, Nurturing anger. That means if you're angry about something, you keep reminding yourself about it. You write it down in your anger diary. Let me get that down to my anger diary. I don't want to forget what they did to me. You harbor resentment. Every person who's got blue eyes, you now hate. Every person that's black hair, you now hate. People with afros, they did something wrong. I'm going to hate them. I'm going to just think about it. I'm going to get a picture of a person in an afro and hate them. Cultivating bitterness. You know what it is? The garden of bitterness. You know what the Bible teaches us? That we should forgive. That when we have clutter in our lives, the way to get rid of it is forgiveness. If we have emotional clutter in our lives, the way to hold on to it is through bitterness. How's that garage doing? Woo-hoo, woo-hoo. Fun, isn't it? Isn't it fun?